that made us different because we weren't doing what the NWA or what would become the G-Funk sound later and the Dre sound and all that stuff. We didn't do any of that. And sometimes for some groups on the West Coast, not any of the ones that pushed through, but the ones that were trying to get through and didn't, they felt like they had to sound like all these other groups that were like the front runners here on the West Coast. And if you ain't as good as them, you ain't going to get on. And we didn't even want to deal with that. We wanted to be something totally different. And that's why our shit, even though we're from the West Coast, sound more East Coastish than people would have thought.
Right. Now the whole the Ice Cube situation, you guys were doing so well at the time that it seems like, I know at one point you guys accused Ice Cube of taking, some of your songs or at least a hook or something like that. Could you elaborate on how that went down back in the day for the people who don't know?
Well, we was all tight back then. We was hanging out like, boys and shit like that. We were doing the Friday soundtrack. We were contributing a song called Roll It Up, Light It Up, Smoke It Up. And it's in a scene with Chris Tucker where he's smoking and you see a Cypress poster in the back. So we made that shit. And at the time we were making Temple Boom. And, we played him some of those songs. And then after, a similar hook ended up coming out for that Friday soundtrack. And, we were a little taken back by that. And, things happened. Fortunately, we were able to squash that shit in 1997 and, put all that behind us and stuff like that. And we've done shows and done a number of songs together since then. But yeah, I mean, we were, at that point, we felt there was it was funny and shit. And we reacted, and then he reacted and we reacted, and it went like a fucking circle. But fortunately, because we were really good friends before all the shit started, that we were able to talk as men, as former friends, and saying, hey, let's put this shit behind us and squash this shit, because what it was causing was a ripple and in a division of our people and shit like that. And I know that he felt it, I felt it, and we both felt like, as fathers, as businessmen, as motherfuckers who, are role models to some, we got to be bigger than that. And I think both of us realized that. So we were able to squash it and, repair our friendship. I mean, yeah, we're obviously not as tight as we were back then. He's got a lot of shit going on. I got a lot of shit going on. But, I always, respected him, and he was always one of my favorites. So it was tough, being at odds with him, but it felt good to repair the relationship after that.
Absolutely. I was also going to ask you about you guys pretty much came together and decided to squash the beef because it was causing a divide between Latinos and blacks at that time. And you guys seemed to get into a point where it could have got violent. So I think it's cool that you guys, cooler heads prevail and say, you know what, man, let's put this to the side, because people even talking about coast and all that going at each other. So I'm glad you guys were able to do that. Definitely.
And I gotta give credit to Mac 10 for that, because, he reached out to me first and he was like, yo, B, this is some bullshit. We don't want to get nobody hurt and blah, 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 blah. I was totally agreeing. So I'm like, yeah, because, it could get ugly, because we both sides had serious people supporting one another, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And in some cases, a lot of our friends are the same, because that's how tight we were, you know what I'm saying? So it was better that we, squashed that shit. Not just for ourselves, but for the people who could have, been hurt behind that shit. But, I got much love for my dude. You know what I'm saying? I was glad when we put that shit aside.
That just kind of shows you how strong hip hop and hip hop culture was back then. It is now, that it was really just moving coast. If it was negative energy, people were going to move in a negative way. If it was positive, they were going to move in a positive way, vice versa. Take us back 10, 15 years prior to West Coast gang culture. and how it was what hip hop pretty much is now, how influential it was, how you grew up in the gang life in the city of Los Angeles, and how it kind of molded you going into hip hop and things like that.
Oh yeah, that shit. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, you considered yourself like a soldier for whatever hood you were representing at the time, and you know, some of us were able to get out through music and whatnot. And when we did, we either, you know, represented it by depicting what the reality is there, or we went in a whole other direction to not, you know, seem like we're glorifying or celebrating. But some of us were very much, you know, unapologetic about the shit too. You know, the way that we represented and depicted some of those scenarios that you know you live and see when you're living in those fucking streets and in those areas. You know what I'm saying? So it was a time, and a lot of motherfuckers, you know, found their voice in that. So when NWA cracked it open, when they cracked that shit open, I mean, the floodgates began, because it's like they came from a very aggressive style of telling you what the fuck was going on. Not to mention it was dope as fuck, but it was very aggressively dope. You know what I'm saying? So you heard so many motherfuckers trying to emulate that style, and that's sort of what, you know, what birthed the seed of gangster music, because motherfuckers was like, okay, they're doing it. Okay, I'm gonna tell my story from my hood the way, you know, the way I'm gonna do it. And you know, it became its own genre. You know, because before it was just, you know, part of the hip hop pantheon of songs. Okay, this is a hip hop song. It's fucking, you know, about this shit, but it wasn't necessarily labeled gangster rap until there was like a list of fucking people doing gangster rap style shit. And then it became a subgenre of rap. But, you know, and that was the shit I was talking about in terms of being on the West Coast. Sometimes, you know, labels, if your shit was too out of the box or too different and you were from the West Coast, they didn't even fucking look at you because you didn't have that sound. They were looking for that gangster shit, you know, because they figured they could, you know, run on the coattails of groups like NWA, who had tremendous success in that lane. You know what I'm saying? They built it. Ice-T and NWA, they built that fucking lane. So, you know, you had so many trying to do that shit, and some got on and made their own way in it and made their own style within it, and that's how it became a subgenre. Because I don't think if those songs come out, and a lot of them are fucking dope, classic, iconic motherfucking songs, that doesn't exist if that doesn't happen. So, you know, that goes to show you the strength of the shit that we lived here on the West Coast, you know, and in terms of some of that gangster rap shit, most importantly Southern Cali, because that's some shit that a lot of us were living every day, you know, and to talk about it, to be the voice of those motherfuckers still there, you know, it became a fucking genre, because some of these guys were fucking really good at telling those stories, obviously, you know, and writing the songs. And, you know, again, we got classic music that came out of that. But, you know, what's crazy is that being from the West Coast, Cypress Hill, and as aggressive as our songs were and our stories were, they never considered us gangster rap. Only when they needed to point the finger at hip hop groups, they would label as that. But normally they didn't label us as gangster rap because we didn't sound like it.
Y'all were the first group I know that I remember to make weed just be the dopest thing ever. Now, I was damn sure not smoking weed when I was listening to y'all. Okay, way far beyond that before I started blazing. But just talk about the culture and how y'all brought just weed into a popular arena to households everywhere, and just the backlash that it was before it was popular now.
You know, it was kind of like a balance, right? And we didn't know. We were just sort of being us. Like, you know, we were the dudes who smoked a whole lot of fucking weed, even though it wasn't as good as the weed of today. We smoked a lot of it, and we were constantly looking at the High Times magazine. I mean, we were fucking stoners. When we put it into the music, we were just being us, because we figured, you know, if we're gonna be us, let's just be us. And the first weed song I wrote, I was out. The idea popped into my head. I was getting high with these two homies that I went to school with. I was doing continuation school in Gardena, right? You know, I was a very problematic kid, you know, and me and my homie Wino and this other dude named Creeper, or fuck, I don't remember if it was Scape One. That's right. It was Wino and Scape One and one other dude, and these are my homies from Gardena, two artists and stuff, and one's an actual DJ too. But we were there. We were smoking a bunch of boof weed, because obviously we didn't have any good weed at that time. None of us had a lot of money, and you know, the weed wasn't getting us high. And fucking the homie named Wino, he goes, hey B, light another. And boom, that right there, it hit in my head. Oh, that would be a fucking good song. And after that, I went to Muggs' studio the next day, and I fucking wrote that song. And, you know, it was about weed and all that shit, like, you know, obviously, but I sort of did it in a way where the music was the weed. If you listen to the context of the song, the music is the weed, right? But that's what sparked the first cannabis song for Cypress Hill, was that shit. And then I came with Stoned is the Way of the Walk after that. And I just unconsciously started doing the weed songs, and I made a habit to do one weed song every album, you know, whether it was celebratory or educational. But, you know, when the album hit, it was very taboo at the time. So people were like, oh shit, I don't know if we should fuck with this. But fortunately it resonated. And then, you know, when High Times magazine put us on the cover, and we were the first hip hop group to do that, it changed our world in terms of cannabis and music. It like just solidified us as the voices of cannabis, you know, in music at the time, not just hip hop, but in music. And you know, we were always advocates and activists. So, you know, we joined Normal for a time and helped spread education and whatnot in terms of cannabis. And, you know, all the uses. The things that you hear today now are the things we were pumping way back then. It's just, you know, the information is more available to people now.